digital innovations like 3D modeling, which enable urban planners to build essentially virtual representations of cities, are transforming not just the way urban planners work, for example, by actually visualizing different urban development scenarios and their implications, but it's also enabling much stronger citizen engagement like never before, which is also enabling much greater participation and transparency in urban decision-making processes. So to discuss this, we have a very distinguished panel of speakers with us today who will be sharing their knowledge and experience on this topic. But before we delve further into this, I'd like to go through a few housekeeping matters. So first of all, we will provide copies of the slides from today's webinar. And you'll receive these within 24 hours. And this will be sent to the email which you used to register for the webinar. Along with this, we'll also be recording the session, and you'll also receive the YouTube link. And we'll also be sharing the post-webinar evaluation form with you. And I would like to really strongly encourage everyone to please complete this evaluation, because this will help us to better design future webinars. Also in questions and answers, first of all, we would love to have your participation, and please ask questions, share your opinions and your views. You've probably noticed the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Please use this to type your questions, comments, etc. during the session. The speakers will be responding to your questions either during the session, or they will respond to these at the end during the discussion period. So without any further ado, I have the pleasure of introducing Robert Giles, who is the Chief Sector Officer from ADB's Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department. And in this capacity, Robert is also manager of the Urban Financing Partnership Facility, under which the ASEAN Australia Smart Cities Trust Fund falls. And Robert will be delivering the opening remarks for this session. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Allison. It's really a pleasure for me to be here, because not only am I an urban planner by training, but Allison and I used to be colleagues in the Pacific Department together, a time I remember quite fondly. So thank you for inviting me here to do this. Actually, I think you've already done the opening remarks, so I'll just say a couple of quick things. You know, the ASEAN Australia Smart Cities Trust Fund is our newest fund in ADB, and I remember quite well when we set it up last year in record time, thanks to help from a lot of people around ADB. And the idea of, and it's really a mouthful, so I'm just going to refer to the trust fund. The idea behind this fund is to help ASEAN cities to enhance their planning systems, their service delivery, and their financial management by developing and testing appropriate digital urban solutions and systems. And in doing so, we hope to facilitate the city's transformation to become more livable, resilient, and inclusive, and in the process identify scalable and replicable best practices across cities in Asia and the Pacific. And this is very much in line with ADB's operational priority 4 under our strategy 2030, which aims to make cities more green, competitive, inclusive, and resilient. And so there's a nice sort of alignment here between the interests of the urban group, the trust fund, and ADB's long-term strategy. So, you know, with all of this, I think that today's session being the third webinar in the series, we can do our part to help cities become, to improve their planning, their service delivery, and to become, in general, more green, more resilient, and more livable. So I look forward to hearing some of the conversation. I'm sorry I have to leave a little bit early, but let's get into it. So Allison, back to you, please.
Thank you very much, Robert, for your opening remarks and for setting the scene for today's discussion. So we like to keep these webinars as interactive as possible. So next slide, please, Christine. We'll be having our first audience poll. So we'll be posting a question for the audience, and we ask you to vote for your preferred response. And you'll have exactly 5 seconds to respond to the question before Christine pulls up the results. So the first poll question of the day is, how well do you think your city government is using digital technology in spatial planning? So either extremely well, very well, fairly well, not well at all, or not applicable, since to the best of my knowledge, my city does not use digital tools for urban planning. So you have several seconds to please vote, and then we will be pulling up the poll response. Okay, I think we will be closing the poll in the next couple of seconds. Okay, so the results. So we have, okay, so it seems like the majority of our participants feel that, well, we have at least 30, so about a third think their city is doing a fairly good job, with the about 18% thinking they're doing very well. So that's, and then 4% actually extremely well. So that's actually fairly positive. But then again, we have about 36% of participants who feel that there's not, their cities are not doing a good job. So it seems like there's still much scope for improvement, which is why exactly we are having webinars like the one today to share knowledge on how digital technologies can be used to improve planning. Okay, thank you. So moving on, next slide, please. I would now like to introduce the first speaker of the afternoon. We're lucky enough to have Teresa Fink, who's a researcher in urban design computation in the competence unit, Digital Resilient Cities at the AIT Austrian Institute of Technology in Vienna. So Teresa will be discussing how smart cities planning systems are being used to address some of the most pressing urban development challenges in our times, particularly building resilience to climate change. So thank you very much, Teresa. Over to you.
Thank you, Alison. Next slide, please. So as we all recognize in daily life that there are our cities as the hotspot of today's challenges. So our urban developments are driven by the high expectation by decision makers to reach climate targets and city targets. There are many different sustainable development goals that we need to consider when planning a city. And also the urban densification and transformation that is going on needs to be reflected in the practice. The availability of data is dependent on the location of the world where we plan, and there are also cities which have a wide range of open data available, like as Vienna, for example, where I'm presenting from, and also different cities like Singapore and Sydney are kind of the pilots that actually provide people with a lot of open data. So due to those challenges we are facing when urban planning, there are new requirements we need to consider. We need to set new standards. So in order to achieve a high quality planning process, we need to involve the stakeholders and citizens from the very beginning in order to achieve a high transparency and also an informed planning procedure. It's not enough anymore to have a best guess or a good design. We actually need to prove the performance of our designs based on a KPI set. And those performance indicators could be climate, accessibility, economy, and also energy performances. The digital cooperation is especially important nowadays in terms of physical distancing, but also to share our project's results with the clients and to actually be involved and to engage with stakeholders and citizens from the very beginning. Next slide, please. Just as we at AIT are focusing our research and consulting on all topics regarding the cities and the built environment. The overall objective is the urban resilience and transformation of our cities, and therefore we come up with the strategies and processes for the energy climate transformation. In order to achieve this objective, we need to apply smart spatial planning systems to enable an informed and participatory planning process. Next slide, please. To give you some insight in some of our projects, for example, on the left side, you can see the digital city project we did this year. We finished this year for the International Building Exhibition in Heidelberg in Germany, where we developed an action-oriented framework for the Patrick Henry Village, which was a 100-hectare site in the south of the city and will be transformed in a new district. And how the digital planning process and the digital running of the district will work was actually created and developed. So the co-creation master planning process was also happening during this project, which we did together with the project consortium led by KCAB. On the right side, you see the urban climate strategy in the city of Linz. This project is still going on and recently had a big success by presenting the project's result and actually already achieving an impact. Because there we did the climate modeling, came up with scenarios and did the impact assessment, in the end finishing with the action plan. And the city of Linz already approved that those changes and some of the implementation process will actually happen, that we can reach the climate goals that are set for the future. Next slide, please. So in a traditional planning approach for cities, you have a high use of resources, but there is still not a guarantee for the best solution because it's mainly focused on the design itself. You have a high demand of many meetings and still you have a limited performance evaluation, and you need to have a good coordination of the specialists, but this is usually not integrated in the process and is happening in different software environments. So in order to achieve this, next slide, please. What we aim for in the smart spatial planning systems is that we have a new standard for this approach. In order to achieve a good design, we have a co-design with the interaction with the stakeholders from the very beginning, where we start the planning process with GIS-based urban analysis and also with the setup of the boundary conditions. And therefore, we develop performance-proof design. Means we are not focusing on one design and start as traditionally and just going in more detail, but we actually generate the whole design space. Means we don't set only one goal, but we have thousands of different variants. And in order to actually have design performance driven variants and solutions, we need to actually assess those designs from the very beginning. Means what we are doing, we come up with parametric model. We have certain input parameters based on regulation and the goals. And then we assess their performance for climate, for energy, for accessibility, and also economic impact through AI assistance. Means every change we do in our parametric models will be reflected and we get a real-time feedback about the performance. And this is happening not just in our labs itself, but actually we can share our ongoing planning with our stakeholders and clients on our 24/7 online planning platform. Because especially nowadays, the interactive 3D models and augmented reality models allow us to naturally interact with our planning procedures. And we just recently finished a project which was completely happening in lockdown, so no natural meetings going on, but actually it was possible to share our results and ongoing project insights with the client all the time. So therefore we need the new methods, tools, and processes. Next slide, please. What you see here is our City Intelligence Lab, and you see the front end, which is the interactive design space, but this is all fostered by the back end, which is running the simulation, machine learning framework, and the neural networks that actually allow us those intelligent solutions for the co-creation in digital urban planning. We are applying cutting-edge technologies such as augmented reality and the interactive design interfaces to generate those solutions, negotiate about them, and being able to change them within a meeting and discussion and see immediately the impact using artificial intelligence solutions. With those projects, we are consulting citizens, city authorities, real estate developers, and a variety of urban practitioners. means we do consulting in daily practice, but also we are conducting fundamental research on those topics. Next slide, please. What you can see here is that we have the real-time assessment of a variance, where on the right top you see solar radiation and wind comfort, which is usually a simulation, especially wind, which would take a few hours to run, but using our back-end technologies, which are self-developed in our city intelligence lab, we can assess the performance of those scenarios within a second. This is only applied now on one block, but in general, this is happening also on whole master plans. So we can come up with a best practice for resilient topologies, resilient designs, and therefore develop the guidelines and strategies for the cities. Next slide, please. At the end, I want to show you a short video about infrared and about the City Intelligence Lab developments, which is the real-time urban planning platform. Different KPI sets, which can be individually defined for each project different, can be evaluated, assessed, and therefore our designs are not just coming up with one solution, but in the end actually having the design space and knowing the performance to make the best possible, because you can't have like all KPIs 100%. There is some trade-offs. So in that sense, you need to understand the relation between those KPIs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teresa, for the excellent presentation. It was very, very interesting to hear how digital planning is being applied in practice using the examples you cited, Heidelberg, Linz, and also to learn, just what goes into developing these models and how they can be used to assess different scenarios. Another point that I was interested in that you talked about was just how you engage early and upfront with your stakeholders to involve them in the process, and how the technologies enable you to better do this. So thank you once again for an interesting presentation. So next we will move on to our second audience poll. So the second question for the poll is, how well do you think your city government is utilizing digital tools to involve public and other city officials in the urban planning process? So this is very relevant given our last presentation. So the possible answers are extremely well, very well, fairly well, not well at all, not applicable. To the best of my knowledge, my city does not engage the public as part of the planning process. So again, you have 5 seconds to vote and respond to the poll before we pull up the results. Okay, the news is quite not so rosy as the first poll. We have about over half actually of participants who do not think that your city is doing enough to use digital tools to engage the public and other city stakeholders, which is a shame, because as you will be hearing throughout the day, there's so many new technologies and tools to allow stakeholders to interact. It's not just a one-way street anymore where cities disseminate information to citizens. With tools, with the new tools available, you can involve stakeholders in the planning process from the beginning and throughout. So hopefully you'll be learning more about that today, and you can encourage your cities to adopt some of the technologies to enable greater participations and citizen inputs. Thank you. Okay, so next I would like to introduce our speaker, who we're privileged to have. We have Saibal Das Chowdhury, who is an urban technologist and CEO and co-founder of Urbanization, a city-as-a-service software platform. Saibal will be presenting a case on digitized urban planning from Phnom Penh in Cambodia. And this is great, since generally when we talk about digital tools and digital planning systems, it tends to be in the context of wealthier cities that have a lot of resources to invest in development of digital models. So I'm really looking forward to hearing Saibel's presentation on how such models can be used and applied in a developing country context. So over to you, Saibel. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. I'd like to start a little bit of story. This company, Urbanetic, I would go around the cities within the Asian region or ASEAN region and talk about how to adopt and use a digitized urban planning as a practices and technology and to achieve their SDG goals. So after some few weeks, somebody will come back to me and say, "Oh, well, we have a problem." And I say, "What?" And they say, "Well, we don't have much data." And I say, "What?" "Oh, we don't even have a budget." So I say, "Yes, right. You don't have a data and you have a budget. So how do you basically go about digitizing your cities?" So today I'm proud to say that, yes, with the technology, rapid pace of development of technology, today most of these cities are equally have the access to all the sophisticated urban technologies like other richer counterparts to actually work for digitized urban planning and to meet their goals. Next slide, please. So let's start with this. Early on in 2013, we were actually given the task of reaching a 50,000 hectare city at the capital city of Malaysia. So one of the things that we started, me and my colleagues who come from a background of parametric modeling for the last 20, 30 years, our idea is to basically, if you can model the city into one canvas and parameterize them and see the scenarios, we could basically talk about how to bring down, basically the idea was to make the city green, smart, and connected. So energy consumption at a building level, at a district level, at a site level was a paramount importance. So what we saw is, look at these plans. So this is basically, these are images from each of the pages that we were given into the master plan, and each one of them is basically island on their own. So I cannot actually make anything. If I make changes in one, what is the impact of the other side? So I think that was basically how it started to say, look, we basically need to digitize, not really call it digitize, actually digitalize is the right word, so that we could actually, multiple scenario planning can be done, and we can draw some sort of trade-offs between cost as well as and the results. Next slide, please. Okay, so on the other hand, the new emerging digitized urban planning system, they are very fast. You could actually, give you an example. I mean, the first project together with this was Melbourne, which took us just 6 days to digitize the entire city. New York, 2.5 hours. So that's if you have data. They are fast, they're integrated, they're data rich. The core thing about the digitized urban planning, you have to have a data rich platform. They're parametric, they're compliant with scenario simulation, and most important, actually, they are a great aid to meet your what you call is sustainable development goals. You can see these screenshots where we have the parametric model of, we call it LOD1, level of detail 1, and then we have the non-parametric, which is the photogrammatic model, and both share a common data. I mean, you could see basically the dashboard and the input panels out there. Next, please. So, so the magic behind this digital urban planning and the scenario simulation, real-time simulation, is actually a common database. So we believe that in our tool, we call it a precinct information model. Some people call it horizontal BIM. Some people call it GeoBIM. In Singapore, they use the term GeoBIM. So it's basically what you're saying, any digitized urban planning system is essentially around a unified data model of the city. So this is what our first idea was to create a semantic data model, or call it a grammar of the city, in such a way, in a generic way, that any city in the world could be analyzed and digitized the same way. So that's basically the, I don't call it an IP per se, but that's our a secret sauce to say. So next, so sorry. I wanted to hold on this slide. So if you look at this model, which is a unified data model, which is basically, and around it, you have what we call is a use case data sets like water management. It could be basically stormwater management, wastewater management, safety, transportation, energy, waste. With each of these applications can bring in their own data into the unified model to allow people, as I say, manage the city or a district throughout the life cycle, which is plan, finance, design, build, and manage. And I think for us, our focus at the moment is mostly on planning and also financing, because at the end of the day, if you build something and that you cannot manage it properly in the sense that you're not generating revenue out of it, or you're not enhancing the value of it, those kind of systems. So we believe that a good spatial planning system should also be able to fold in the future, saying, okay, if my terminal value is 10 years or 15 years, how do I basically generate income from here? So the architects in the future will not only make pretty designs, they should be able to actually see, my design, when I drag and drop it into urbanity fabric, it tells me how it will be from the compliance perspective, from the sustainability perspective, from urbanity perspective, not only that, but also from the financial and what you call feasibility perspective. Next slide, please. So this is what happened. So as we went around different cities, so our partner in Cambodia, they invited us to partner with the Environment Ministry there, and I did a 2-day workshop on how to go about implementing what we call is a Phnom Penh Sustainable City Plan. They have a very elaborate plan, and we saw that, okay, we have 48 initiatives, great methodology, and however, sorry, next slide, please. However, here's the challenge. The data collection assimilation is a massive task. Cost of digitization can run up to tens of millions of US dollars. I've looked at Singapore. Our earlier budget was 75 million US dollars just to digitize the whole city. So we needed to produce the most effective solution. Next slide, please. And this is what we did. So we actually found a way. So what we were given, simple, that's it. And we have absolutely no data. And what we did was we basically come out with an innovative solution where we could fly in a single drone, basically RGB camera drone, got all the JPEG images, put it into basically what you call is a point cloud, extracted all the information from there, and you can see that we could actually today we are able to explore the city, analyze it, and visualize it in 3D. So what I'm trying to say is that with this new technology innovation, the world is becoming exceedingly flatter in the sense that all these sophisticated urban technology can be easily accessible to all the cities in the developing economies who have the ambition to meet their sustainability goals. Next, please. So these are some of the, you can look at basically, the left panel is the input panel, the right panel is your, so we have, we actually look at the, what do you call the impact of all your design changes real time into water, waste, economic, including jobs, and even GDP. Thank you. Next, please. So this is what the picture you get at the very, very rough, but yet very usable photogrammetry image of the city itself. And then, as you saw on your side, these two basically, the parametric model and the non-parametric model, share a common database. So you could still click on these and analyze, at least explore, if not basically simulate. Next, please. So this is basically talking about efficiency and compliance. So what happened is when the data is actually built and it's imported, each lot, and so you have the zoning, the building codes, and all the data, they're all digitized into a common platform. So in short, if you're an owner of this land and you're a developer, you could just click on this 7-acre land and it will tell you how to carve it out for the future, basically livability, sustainability, as well as financial economic data. So this is basically, when you say the code, so every lot is actually has all the relevant regulatory compliance data, for example, sustainability related, or anything of, we call it urban UDG, urban design guidelines, everything is digitized. Planning schemes are digitized. So as you click on this lot, it automatically, within minutes, actually, you can generate basically a feasible development feasibility plan, which confirms to the sustainability requirements. Next, please. So next step in the Cambodia context is that, yes, we had an issue, a small issue, because we were not able to get the real data on the and the last slide you saw, which was on feasibility. So next is to basically get, so 3 things that we do in our software, it is built in, which is environmental sustainability analysis, capacity management, and as you saw, the development feasibility analysis. And we are collecting all the data, buildings, the codes, and then there's planning schemes, market demand supply data that goes in. So everything is put into one canvas so that we could actually run simulation much more precisely, much more accurately, or reasonably accurately. Next, please. So I think this is my last slide, and I'm trying to say is that while we have sorted out the data problem and we are working on the budgeting and the financing issue, and as I say, that no technology ever successful without a viable business plan. And I think that is the crux of basically the matter, that yes, there are a lot of technology available, but the use is always limited, because a digital plan, what you call is the business model is not always viable. As people always tell me, Saibal, all cities have lots of problems, but where is the money? So this is something that we are building, as Alison mentioned, a SaaS model of a city where you could basically get to a URL, urbanetic.io for a particular city, and you basically, if you have the data, whether it is open data or it is privately a private domain data, you could actually import, analyze, visualize, and explore the city. At the same time, as I say, the external, we are actually through the API, so everything is on the API, external data, weather, demographics, and property data, and also external application could actually interact directly, which is property management, facilities management, urban transportation. Again, urban transportation requires a lot of demand analysis data. So from there, so with that, I actually conclude the slide session. But Alison, if you have some time, yeah, I think there was no time for the video. We have a video for this particular plot of land and Cambodian experience. You are free to, anybody's interested, to check out our website, and we will be posting it there. Thank you very much, and I hope any question we could answer later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Saibal, for a fascinating presentation. It's great to hear that these urban technologies are now being made accessible to developing countries, to cities with limited resources and that have little data to be fed into models. So I think that the story of Cambodia that you presented today will resonate probably with many of our participants from our developing member countries today. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So next we will be moving actually to our 3rd audience poll, and Christine will be posting our next question, poll question, which is, do you think digital planning would make it easier for the public and other city stakeholders to participate in city planning? Yes, no, or I'm unsure. Again, you'll have about 5 seconds to think of an answer and vote. Great. So yes, I think this is probably a more obvious answer to this question, with 86% of participants agreeing that digital planning would facilitate access. And I think this is fairly obvious. I mean, back in the old days, if you were interested in what your city was doing in development processes, development proposals, you'd have to go to town halls and physically get to the meetings, sit there, make the time to be there. But now, I mean, with virtual, with technology, social media, digital platforms, you can log into your device and essentially pull up a proposal, see what the details are, and then input your feedback. And it can be anytime, you can be in any place. So these tools are actually very, very powerful for citizen participation and engagement. So hopefully we'll be seeing more and more of this as more cities adopt digital planning systems. Okay, thank you. So let's move on to our next presentation. I'd like to introduce Ricardo Cabrera-Nyst, who's a senior architect, building engineer, and urban design specialist at Esri R&D Center in Zurich. Ricardo will be talking about the development of 3D city information models using ArcGIS CityEngine, which essentially allows you to build entire 3D cities. And I understand this has been applied to cities such as Marseille and Munich. So very much looking forward to this presentation. So please go ahead, Ricardo.
Hello, Alison. Thank you very much for the introduction. Well, I would like to start the presentation talking about ArcGIS Urban, which is a powerful platform designed to help everyone involved in the urban development process. ArcGIS Urban can be configured after the applicable zoning code, so it reacts to the regulations in real time as we sketch out our design in 3D. Also, capacity metrics are generated in parallel, like population, households, water consumption, or jobs created. So it becomes a very valuable tool for comparing different scenarios and therefore making decisions. But Urban is not only a very capable planning tool. As a web-based application, it really works as a hub connecting all the stakeholders together, from the municipality and the planners to the community itself. Going through all the features of ArcGIS Urban would be out of the scope today because we have so little time. So I'm going to show you a very quick sample of Pearl City in Honolulu. Next slide, please. So in this case, we placed a geo-referenced draft on the background as a guide to sketch out our building footprints within the parcels. And just going to show you in the video how it's done, so you get an idea of the interface. There we, selecting the split tool, we just kind of sketch out the shape of the building footprint, and then we have to apply one of the building types on the list. In this case, it's going to be a mixed building with commercial on the bottom, ground floor, and residential on the top. And there it is, the bulk mass is generated. And there are many zoning code parameters that we can configure for a determined area, such as maximum height, maximum coverage, FAR, tiers and setbacks. I mean, the list goes on. We can even configure sky planes, for example. And if the building doesn't comply with the previously configured regulations for that specific area, we'll get a warning. And at this point, we could either modify the base regulations using an overlay or modify the building to get rid of the warning. Well, Urban implements the same technology as CityEngine, but in JavaScript. So it uses the same Urban rule, but just with a simplified interface that you can operate directly from the browser. So it's possible to import our urban scenes from CityEngine, refine the design, and then resynchronize again to get the plan again into ArcGIS Urban with the updated changes. There is much more to it, but I'm going to move on and show how urban plans can be exported from CityEngine. So next slide, please. So here we have our Pearl City plan imported into CityEngine, and we can check that our buildings retain all the attributes that were specified in Urban. Same as before, we can also place the draft on the background and create a new scenario where we may start refining the previous model. Also, combining different viewports is a very useful practice at this point while using the polygonal modeling tools. So we can define the shapes more accurately after the reference image. And it's always possible to specify the precise dimensions, so we can place everything exactly where we need it. And this feature has been improved in the latest versions. So we can now create more elaborated models directly in CityEngine, like this little restaurant, for example. And even this kind of vernacular roof that you see now, this is very common on the island of Honolulu with these little openings on the top. So now we can, of course, take advantage of the procedural power of CityEngine and apply different CGA rules to our footprints. And playing around with the parameters, we can achieve different configurations and generate a pretty convincing urban landscape like the one you see now. And we could, of course, add more assets and streets that would add value to our final model. And this is exactly where I'm going to show in the next part. So next slide, please. Now, this is another project located in the city of Pasadena in the US. And the size of the scene is pretty big, like 30 by 30 kilometers. And the buildings were generated with the same rule you saw before. And at this final step, the scene was exported into Unreal Engine to add more detailed assets and animations. And as you can see, the visual atmosphere becomes much more convincing. And finally, I would like to show you some of the features of the CityEngine VR experience. Once the project is exported into Unreal Engine, we can go one step forward and turn our urban planning vision into a real immersive experience. The user finds himself in front of this virtual table where he can interact with the model using the controllers to navigate through the different plans and scenarios. The interface is simple and effective, with a daylight control, switch for the scenarios, rotation and zoom control. Here is just rotating to the desired point. And it's important to say that it's also a collaborative experience. This is meaning that with several headsets, it's possible to bring other people there and show them around. And at any moment, the user can jump into the scene in real scale to compare scenarios, study the shadow impacts, and basically have a taste of what it feels being there. They can jump to different points of interest or just teleport to any position. The VR experience is currently available at the Epic Games Marketplace, so it's something that you can really just try on. So I invite you to have a look and try it together with CityEngine and ArcGIS Urban. And I think that's all. So we can go for the next last slide. And so thank you very much. I hope you found the information useful. And I invite you to check out more about ArcGIS Urban and CityEngine, because there's a lot of detailed material available online. And otherwise, in case you have questions or you need any other information, don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. That was incredible. I think this presentation really helped us understand how powerful these digital systems and tools, including ArcGIS CityEngine, can be in really creating the virtual reality. It's amazing what technology can do now to help explore and share different urban plans and scenarios. So yeah, thank you very much for bringing that to light.
Sure, you're welcome.
Okay, so I think next slide, please. So we have our fourth and final audience poll for today. So Christine will be pulling up the questions. Okay, so the poll question is, subject to availability of suitable engagement platforms, how willing are you to participate in your city's urban planning process? Extremely willing, very willing, fairly willing, or not willing at all? Okay, you have 5 seconds to get your vote in. Okay, and what are our responses? Okay, almost half of participants are extremely willing. We have, again, almost 40% who are very willing to participate. Again, I think this poll is probably fairly biased, because I assume by joining today's webinar, you probably have an interest in urban planning and engagement with your city. But it's great to see that there is that enthusiasm and willingness. And it's good to see that not a single participant who answered the poll was unwilling to engage. Okay, thank you for your participation. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay. Oh, we have it, sorry. How well do you think your city government is using digital technology to check compliance to urban plans? So either extremely well, very well, fairly well, not well at all, or not applicable. To the best of my knowledge, my city does not use digital tools for compliance checking. So 5 seconds to respond, please. Okay, again, we have participants feeling that there is much room for improvement. I guess almost half of participants feel that their city governments could be using digital technologies more or better, more effectively, to check compliance with urban plans, to make sure that for example, developments are in line with planning. So, but having said that, it's good to see that almost 20% think fairly, 21% fairly well, and again 10% between extremely and very well. So that's encouraging. Thank you. So next slide, please. Okay, so I have the pleasure of inviting our final speaker for this session. We have Adam Beck, who is the Executive Director of the Smart Cities Council, Australia and New Zealand. And Adam today will be talking about digital twins and what are these, how they're used, and some of their benefits. So please go ahead, Adam. Thank you.
Alison, thank you so much for allowing me to speak this evening to your guests, and also to the ADB for having me. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to go through this very swiftly. If we could move to the next slide. Thank you. Digital twin is certainly a hot topic and concept at the moment. Indeed, it's been around as a tool and an approach for planning and designing for a long, long time, dating back to other industries in aerospace and aeronautical engineering. We've seen digital twin being applied to sectors like mining and industry, automotive. It's certainly been touching on many, many sectors for a long time, and in some way, for the built environment, a little bit newer. And when you Google digital twin, you'll 9 times out of 10 come up with a response in terms of its definition as being a digital replica of a physical thing, which indeed it certainly is. Next slide, thank you. The bit that often gets underrepresented and I think underimagined is the operational benefits and opportunities that come with the digital twin around the real-time nature of data. Once we connect a digital twin to the internet, the data sources essentially become endless. And so the digital twin really comes to life through the Internet of Things during the sort of asset operation and maintenance phase, and of course the ongoing operation of our cities. Next slide. We did some very unscientific research last year where we asked government and industry 3 questions. We asked them, what do they define as a digital twin? What do they believe the benefits are? And the 3rd question we asked was, how are you applying or using or interacting with digital twins at the moment? And we really just wanted to get a quick temperature test on what was happening and what people were thinking and feeling. And the words that come up on the screen there in front of you around the definition are somewhat expected. It's a virtual model. It's a digital representation. It helps represent reality. There's words in there like 3D and 4D, the use of smart devices and synchronizing in real time the physical and digital world. So no real additional insights coming through on the question around how the digital twin is defined. Likewise, if you go to the next slide, you'll see that the benefits that were described, again, very common to us: greater efficiency, improving operational performance, integrated monitoring, strategic scenario testing, all those very common things that we've grown to become familiar with the digital twin. Next slide. But we are at a time where the digital twin is sort of, I think, part of what we think we know it is, but also I think there's other parts that we're not really fully appreciating. On this diagram on the slide here, you can see how we have somewhat of that traditional BIM world where we plan, design, construct in a digital model. We design in a digital model, we build it referencing a digital model. And as I mentioned, the digital twin really comes alive. If you go to the next slide, once we connect the digital twin to the internet, and of course the Internet of Things, which give us that sort of sensing, processing and analytical power, the digital twin truly becomes something that is quite different to our traditional digital models of the past. Next slide. And this is all great and exciting. However, it is important to note that currently, as of today, there are no standards for digital twins. So we're at a very interesting moment in time with respect to this concept, this approach of the digital twin, where we do not have clear guidance or reference at an international level, at least, in some form of consensus on what a digital twin is, minimum scope or minimum requirements. And so that certainly presents a challenging scenario for us all, both as policymakers, but also practitioners. There is a lot of work going on in the background, so I should acknowledge that. The Gemini principles exist from the UK. ISO has a working group around digital twin. Also, the Centre for Digital Built Britain are doing a lot, but still, there's no standards. Next slide. The diagram, the image that you see on the left there, the digital twin guidance note that the Smart Cities Council released earlier this year, is an attempt and in some way a bit of a holding opportunity for us to try and bring some definition to the digital twin. For those that are really interested, I would suggest that offline we can supply you with a version of that guidance note. It's freely available on our website. But we've made an attempt to try and define what we believe some of the minimum data sets are, and also what are some of the minimum capabilities and functionalities of the digital twin. So certainly very familiar digital model related data sets and capability. However, when we get to the area of real-time asset performance and utilization data, we really start to go to a new place with the digital model. Next slide. And this sort of speaks to this idea of, I believe, that we're under imagining the digital twin. This is my very crude abstract around a digital twin. And once you connect it to the internet is the dotted line that you see in the middle of the slide. You can essentially ingest data sets that are endless. And no longer does it just become a physical form, the performance of a physical asset. It actually starts to really become the heartbeat of the city. We can score happiness now. We can assess happiness. We can quantify happiness. We have budgeting that can be done in real time. Urban risk analysis, greenhouse gas emissions. How many hospital beds are vacant right now in your city? We can certainly, once we connect the internet to the digital twin, bring in and ingest so many emerging data sets that we didn't have access to 12 or 24 months ago. Next slide. So I like this idea that maybe the digital twin certainly is a digital representation of a physical thing. However, it's a more powerful tool, a very strategic tool for directing investment, making sure that we accelerate those outcomes in our cities. So I like to give it a more fuller definition. One on the slide there that you see is an idea. Next slide. So we've got a long way to go. The digital twin is certainly a very interesting idea, concept, approach, and method. We're building a community down in this part of the world, at least in Australia and New Zealand. We've created a digital twin hub. We're sharing a lot of information. We're celebrating digital twin at Digital Twin Week later this month, and really recommend people that really want to immerse themselves in digital twin to come and join the community, share knowledge, and of course build their awareness and understanding and capability. Next slide. That's me done. Alison, thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam, for a great presentation. Thank you for, I think you highlighted some of the things we don't always think about when we talk about digital twins, like some of the operational benefits that come with getting data in real time. And also you raised an interesting point about not having a clear definition or consensus on what exactly a digital twin is. So it's good to hear that work is in progress on addressing this, and hopefully we'll resolve this in the future. So thanks again. I note that we are almost out of time, but hopefully, Christine, can we take one or two questions, since we have quite a few questions that have been posed for the audience. So if we can take a few more minutes just to field some questions to our presenters. Maybe there's a couple. First of all, why don't I'm trying to just pick out the most relevant ones. Maybe one would be, what are the main challenges in embedding local planning regulations in parametric modeling systems? Maybe I'll throw this out to all of the participants, but I don't know, Teresa, Ricardo, others, please, Saibal, please feel free to jump in to answer this question. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. By allusion to CityEngine, maybe I can just give a little hint about that. It's clear that every zoning code is really different, and depending on the town, it's really, it's a challenge to understand before how it's all about, and you have to understand the code, and then you can calibrate the application, like in this case ArcGIS Urban, with the technology of CityEngine to respond interactively or to all that regulations. But the challenge is just to know how it's all about, and then you can translate it into the program to react to your design.
Great, thank you. And does anyone else want to comment on?
Yeah, I think for it's really challenging. We spent quite a lot of time on that. So our first prototype when we built the technology was MCC, Melbourne City Council, because Melbourne, New York, Sydney, these guys, they have all the thing digitized. So we have to take all the building codes, planning schemes, zoning, everything was digitized and put into the data model. So as I showed that if you click on a lot or a footprint, it will actually start procedurally reading those regulatory, which are sustainability related regulation. It could be codes, it could be planning scheme. So yes, I think one challenge is I have not seen that kind of documentation in other cities in Asia as yet, where you could actually at least read the PDF files. So now that we have a model to actually extract all these, at least the quantitative ones to basically input to the model. So this is a challenge. I would say that not many cities have it. Those who have it should not be a problem because technology is pervasive. I mean, it can basically absorb all these detail and put digital tables of all these plans.
Great. Thank you very much, Saibal. We have another question that sort of looks at the use of digital systems from a different angle. There's a question about, we have all these digital technologies and tools to facilitate urban planning, but on the user side, we have a question on, is there a need to build up the digital literacy of people to use these tools and to participate in urban planning processes, and whether there's complementary efforts to build this sort of digital literacy in parallel with the development of these new digital tools. So I wonder if any of our panelists could comment on that question, respond to that question. Thank you.
I think I thought someone else would pick it up, so I give you a quick answer. Is that yes? One of the problems, I can only talk about Asia compared. So we had a couple of projects in the UK and Norway where you have a position called CDO, Chief Digital Officer. So yes, so they are far more prepared. Whereas in Asian cities, the issue is we as a software vendors can sell software, but not the imagination to build the scenarios. So I think that perspective, yes, all the municipalities and other city administration on RDAs, or regional development authorities, must have people and train their people to active the imagination, how to interact with digital systems. And that is an area which I think is lacking at the moment.
Great, thank you very much, Saibal. I notice we still have quite a few questions. We unfortunately won't have time to respond to all these today, but having said that, we will respond in the chat box probably after the session. And also, please feel free to contact us with any questions. You can also reach out to all of our panelists. For more, if you have more questions, they have provided their contact details in their presentation slides. So hopefully you will still be able to have your questions answered, even though we don't have a lot of time today to go through the Q&A, unfortunately. So maybe we will we'll have to close the Q&A session. But before we wrap up, I just want to remind everyone that we will have our next webinar on November 3rd, where we will be talking about intelligent water management systems using AI and IoT. So I really hope that most of you will be able to join what looks like a very interesting webinar session. So with that, I would like to sincerely thank our expert speakers for joining us today and sharing your knowledge and insights with us. I think it's been extremely useful. And also thank you to our participants for joining and contributing to the discussion. So goodbye, everyone, and hopefully see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alice, thank you very much.
You.
Thank you all the
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Feng. Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.